Hello, everyone. Today I have here with me Alana Karen. She's director at Search Platform at Google, and she's the author of the amazing book, The Adventures of Women in Tech. So I'm so happy to have her here with me. Thank you, Alana, for joining me.
Hello.
Hi, so nice to have you here. Thank you for
Great
joining
to be
us.
here.
So we're here today to talk about your amazing book, and I feel really identify with it. So, but first, I would like you to, if you can do an introduction about yourself and tell a little about you and your background and what motivates you
Sure.
to write this book.
Sure, yeah. So I've been in tech 20 years. I initially joined kind of just being a webmaster and working on websites, and then started in startup land, did a failed startup, and then started at Google about 19 years ago, and have had four different jobs kind of in my journey through Google, all very operations focused,
Hmm.
how things get done. And right now I'm in search infrastructure in program management. And so
Hmm.
kind of like the core of the core, how do we help
Yes.
engineers make sure that Google search runs every day, as it should,
Yeah.
optimally, or even better. So, um, I think that journey for me, it was pretty organic, and it wasn't without its challenges. It has its highs, it had its lows, but it was unique. I came from a background where I just had a degree in history. I wasn't particularly technical. I grew up without a lot of money. Like there were just like a lot of things sort of unique to me, and I was really
Hmm.
interested in that story for others. I had this feeling that we weren't really sharing the the set of kind of really unique stories and diversity that we already have in tech, and that was kind
Hmm.
of its own belonging and inclusion issue. And so I got really interested in that and interviewed 80 women and wrote the book because I wanted there to be more stories out there of all the different career paths, all the different backgrounds, all the different ambitions, and of course the advice and a little bit more about the challenges we've run into along the way out there.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's true. We need to show it up and be there. Otherwise, it's really difficult. And reading your book, a lot of questions came to me because, well, I didn't finish the book. I have to be honest. I read half of it, but yeah, I take my time. But it's really interesting because I'm reading it and I feel really identified with many things. My background is not technical also, but I work with a lot of technical companies. And it's like, oh, this happened to me. Oh, this happened to me. Oh, I see this. I feel identified with everything. And one thing that comes to my mind now is that you say we always need to be likable, and it's
Mhm.
something that it happened to me too. And I read a sentence that you say, well-behaved woman really make history. Never make history, sorry. So it's something that gets me. So what can you tell me about that? How can we handle this?
Yeah, it's very interesting. This isn't something that we're entirely in control of. This is something that has kind of happened in society over
Hmm.
hundreds and hundreds of years, that women have a certain role in society and we are raised to fit that role. And sometimes we don't even know that, oh, our timidity or us not speaking up or something is something ingrained in us. We might think of it as our personality. And that might be true, but also I think that there's a lot of these things where over the years we've been taught that like a well-behaved girl acts like this,
Hmm.
or we've seen the downsides of when we've acted out and we've learned to avoid those. And so when we get to the workplace and we have to navigate, what do we do when we want to speak up? What do we do when we have an idea? What do we do when we see something that's not right and we feel like we have to call someone on it? All of that can kind of come up against both how we've learned to speak up, but also how people perceive that when we do. And so a lot of the things that people talk about in the book that have helped them navigate it, and this kind of expectation that somehow you can do all of these things and always be likable, is that they've really tried to make it less about themselves, right? If they have to speak up, it's because they're speaking up for the group. They're worried about the whole. Because that plays into something that women are expected to do, which is to take care of others.
Yes.
And so kind of that can sometimes balance out, oh, I'm worried about my salary. Well, I'm worried about my salary because if I don't speak up, what about all these other people? Or I see that the culture in this group isn't good. And I'm seeing that that's a problem because of this impact on my teammates. And I want to help teammates. And so that can definitely help. I think people have also had to figure out, when do they speak up? How much do they speak up? What's their tone when they do? How frustrated are they when they do? Right? Because often if we've been bottling it up, the first time we talk about it, we're essentially yelling. So, I think there's a lot of things that can help us bit by bit test it out. Some of it is going to be very personal. For me, I use a lot of humor, but that may not work for you, right? I'll crack a joke and hopefully that can bring some levity to the situation, but at the same time be like, oh, that's right. I was mansplaining to you, wasn't I? And so that works for me because I can do it, and I can do it like, not with that weird edginess where really I'm angry, so it's not really a joke, but other people just like that wouldn't work for them, right? That's not what they go to. That's not something that feels comfortable for them. Or maybe they find that their jokes are too edgy, whatever it is, right? It just doesn't work for them. So I do think we can test out different things about when we speak up, how we speak up, and how we do it, right? How we can make it sound like it's for the whole, or recognize that it is for the whole, right? You'll have to test it out and see what works for you.
Yeah, that's really interesting because this happened to me. Not now, but before. I remember they used to tell me, "You are so nice." I was like, "Okay, we are talking about business." I don't know. It was like a little strange.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, I'll add, you can get very contradictory feedback on this at the same time. You can be in a same performance review told that you are too passive in meetings and not speaking up enough. And you can be told that you were too aggressive in this moment when you did. And so some of that I think will be natural, actually, and might actually be true as you were trying to figure things out. Maybe sometimes you were too passive. Maybe sometimes you were overly aggressive in a meeting. But sometimes that's going to be in the eye of the beholder, and you're going to have to figure out what feedback do you take and what do you kind of leave behind as you try to continue on this journey.
Yeah, it's true. I was receiving two feedbacks also. Nice and honest. Too honest and too nice. I was like, okay. But yeah, I was trying also to make a joke about it. And also, I really like I think one of the things that got me in your book is when you say, own your own awesomeness. What do you mean with that?
Yeah, I think in my career, it took me a while. If no one was like, I like praise. I think most of us do. In some form or another. We might not like public praise, but maybe we like, private praise from our manager. And what happened when, I wasn't getting it, or I wasn't getting it all the time, or when my sponsors left the company, or when I was going through a really hard time personally and no one knew it but me. And even when I was more junior in my career, just feeling like I was already enough versus feeling like, oh, I don't have enough talent. I don't have enough skill yet. I don't have enough of this to ask for that job. And so all of this was a real journey for me. And so I felt like it was a really critical muscle to build, that we recognize our own awesome, that we feel it, that we own it, and that we can take that with us. We can take that with us to a new job, to a new team, that we carry that with us, and we don't need constant reinforcement about it because we know what we're good at. We know what we're awesome about. And also that makes us less likely to fall into situations where we don't feel valued at work, right? Because we'll be able to speak about that, or we'll be able to move on if we need to. And often what I would see is that people would develop this over their careers, right? And so by by the time they were ready to retire, they're like, I don't take any nonsense, right? But it would be that huge arc, and it would take years. And along the way, they would have not asked for opportunities, or they would have not stood up for themselves, or they would have stayed in a job too long beyond when it really helped them. And so I was really trying to nudge us, like, could we do that 10 years earlier? Could we do that 20 years earlier, where we feel that? Because I think that would make a big difference in how we move through our careers, and also how we feel about our careers.
Yes, important. And when I think about all the women that you have interviewed, 80, you say, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Give or take.
Yeah, I was thinking, do they have any skills that were more critical for their success? All them? Something in general?
Yeah, I mean, I talk a little bit about, I talk about women's journeys throughout the book generally, and there's a ton of stories in there, and some may resonate with you, others less so. So there's certainly a lot of individual characteristics and things that they did over the course of their careers that I think could be helpful. I had ended up really focusing in chapter 8 on 5 main tools, things that I think that people could build. And for example, one of those was about marketing. And so marketing 101 is what I call it. And a lot of this is linked to what I was just talking about, which is, how do we feel comfortable talking about ourselves, talking about our successes, so that other people know about them? And what I've seen is that many people resist doing this. Some people do it. Some people do it amply. Other people might resist it because, like me, they've got this strong thing about being humble. It's uncomfortable. It feels like boasting. It's not the job, and they think that they should just be focused on the job, and that if they're focused on the job, then good things will come. But what I've seen time and time again is, you really need to pair the things. You need to be doing a great job, and you need to know how to talk about it, because your bosses are busy, or your clients are busy, and you need to help spoon feed them, honestly, so that they know and they think of you when opportunities come, or when it's time to give raises, or whatever it is that helps you along in your career. And even if it's just, say, your performance rating for whatever your cycle is. So you need to know how to say, hey, this is like the great work that I got done, and not feel like, A, you don't deserve it, or B, that's boasting. It should just be part of the job. And so that was a skill and a tool set that I talk about, and that anybody can build, right? And you can test out how you feel comfortable doing it, right? Maybe you mix it, so it's not just about you, but it's also about the team, right? However it helps you feel comfortable, but getting really good at that. Another one that I talk about is finding support. And we talk about that a lot in this space, particularly in terms of mentors and sponsors. But I broaden it up and just talk about, how are you, as you navigate your career, talking with other people, bouncing ideas off of them, and getting that, organic support that you might need as you decide where to go, or whether to talk to your boss about something, or how to deal with a difficult teammate. Because if you have to navigate these things alone, I found that often a lot of uncertainty creeps in. Are you doing the right thing? Are you approaching it the right way? Should you leave? Should you go? And there can be a lot of built-in regret if you're not sure you did the right thing. Whereas people who'd had support along the way were like, well, I talked with these 5 folks, and I ended up deciding to do this. And I think because they had that chance to dialogue about it and really think about it, they seem to just feel much better about the shape of their career and how it had progressed, and also what they'd done in any given situation. Like they felt like they'd really vetted it and thought about it and then decided what to do. So I recommend it, whether it's mentors, sponsors, lighter weight things like you have a internal group that you leverage, maybe, you know, these employee resource groups for women or other intersections, right? Mm-hmm. You also could just even go online. You know, there's Facebook groups, and and just make sure that you've got something for yourself. Family and friends can do it too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. Can you tell us a little more about the other 5 tools, the other ones of the 5?
Sure. So Own Your Awesome is the last one, which we've talked about.
Yes.
There's one that I talk about, which is resilience, and it's been spoken about a lot. This idea of the grit that you will need to persevere through your career. Sometimes it's spoken about a little bit like you had to get it when you were younger, like you got to be gritty to tough it out here. And I talk about it more as a muscle you can develop over time. And you're going to have to develop it just because work is tough. It's not because necessarily, I mean, it could be that you're the only woman in a team of a lot of men and you're feeling a lot of mansplaining on a regular basis or whatever it is. But I think even if you were in a very diverse team, you would have to learn how to have the energy to dialogue and listen to people each day, to take feedback and sometimes even criticism, and to know what to do with that, to fail sometimes, right, in your approach, either talking with others or on projects, and be able to learn from that, pick yourself up and continue. And so I talk about that in the book, just in terms of giving examples of how women ran into it and how they navigate it. And then the last one, I'm like, what is my last one? So wait, I talked about marketing, find support. Oh, just ask. It's actually one of my favorites.
This is really important and difficult.
This one's, and in fact, it's like when people ask me, what do you wish you'd known when you were younger in your career? This is always the answer I give, which is that asking, the power of asking for what you want, for what you need, for what you're interested in is so powerful. And it took me a long time to learn that. Actually, I just wasn't the type. I was pretty inside of myself. I definitely thought that if I was doing a good job, you would see it. And I didn't totally understand. It was very magical to me why other people were getting tapped for opportunities and I wasn't. And it was only later that I realized, oh, like you have to talk about what you're interested in. Like you have to say, hey, I'd be really interested in that leap in my career at some point. Or I know that you're looking for a new manager of that and I'm interested. Or I need more support. Like I need more, like, you know, I'm working round the clock and, you know, here's what that looks like. And I think it's time to hire another person. And you need to be able to do that and build that muscle. And whether it's confidence or being able to back up your questions with thoughts and analysis if needed, or whatever it is, you have to just ask. Like the worst thing that will happen is that they will say no. But even if they say no, they might think about that and it's in their heads later. And it might still pay off down the road. And so in my opinion, it's always worth asking. And I've had to practice this over the course of my career and say, like, this is why compensation is important to me. You know, this is why I'm interested in this opportunity or whatever it is. And so hugely, hugely important. And I think a lot of us just aren't raised to do that, to go back to the likability.
True.
And so we will have to kind of practice and build that muscle when we get to the workplace.
Yeah, it's true. Many times I've been saying that you should ask. So it's true, and but we can get there. I know because
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, you can start small, or
yes, true,
you can even, just what happens if you double your rate, right? And you ask
yeah,
for double next time, right? Like maybe you
yeah,
won't get double, but maybe you'll get more. And so I think we tell ourselves a lot of things that hold us
true.
back. So figuring out how you could have those little safe experiments might, nudge you along down the path.
Yeah, that helps a lot. I started doing it a few years ago, and it works. It's true. But I know at the beginning it's a little a challenge, but yes, it's true.
Yeah.
And and also coming back to the woman that you interview, is there something that you think that all of them have in common? Because all of them work in tech, right? But other thing that they have in common, something that genetic that you can see that they all repeat.
Oh, well, I don't know about genetic. They're from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, all different personalities. I cover that a lot in the book. But what was really interesting is that when I asked why they were interested in working in tech, what they loved about working in
Hmm.
tech, the answers were all like pretty much the same as if we'd
Yes.
rehearsed them. And it was really interesting to see that there was such universality, I guess, in what had brought us
Good.
here, that we were all interested in improving the world, making a difference in the world, and us having actually the ability to do that, right? They saw tech as a way to actually have an impact on the world, that it could magnify what they would be able to do individually. That they really liked the people and the culture in general, found it very open, and lots of smart, interesting people to work with. And often, very practically speaking, better paying, right? Um, in the tech industry, often the salaries can be somewhat more complementary than other industries,
Hmm.
and that gave them an independence in their life they were looking for. So there was kind of this interesting mix of how they would talk about it, but it was all very much the same themes. And I think that if you think about how tech came along, like really as an industry in the last 30 years or
Hmm.
so, I think that um, really opened up a ton of opportunities for women at this
Hmm.
time that we were graduating at higher and higher rates, and gave them interesting places to explore their careers where previously they wouldn't have been able to. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that was the interesting thing that was in common. But otherwise, I would say uh, all kinds of differences. No one type necessarily.
Yeah, yeah. I was reading in your book. Yeah, they are completely different. That's why I was like, maybe there is something that all of them have because they were completely different one from the other.
An
And
appetite. They had a hunger of some.
yeah,
They all had that similar hunger. But that's really the only thing I could say.
yeah, but it's important to know. I think it's a good point. And then there is one thing that I don't know how do you feel it, but there is a well, this is not exactly in your book. I don't think it was in your book, but I hear everywhere that many people think that woman never help woman, and there is a bad situation always. And I don't believe it like this. I think those are the ones that you can listen more because they are
Mhm.
louder. But what do you think about this? Because I think woman help woman. But how do you see it in the tech world?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you'll get there actually, because if you're in the midway point of the
Yeah.
book, you're about to
Ah,
get a
is there?
chapter.
Ah, okay. Because this
You're
is
about to do a chapter about this. Yeah,
ah,
it's
that's
after
great.
the likability. After the likability chapter, I
Oh
segue
yeah,
into
then I'm there.
this right there. You'll be there in a minute. Um, into this problem of paired with likability is the high expectation we have of women to help other women.
Hmm.
And partially this is just, how we were again raised. Like
Hmm.
we're raised to help others, help community, take care of families. Like all types of things. And mind you, this is changing over time, but it's still very much the traditional role that many people are operating under. And so many of us were sort of raised in that. And there's this expectation of likability, in general, and this will vary from culture to culture, but is sort of generally true. And so paired together, you can have this real, like a blowback if a woman feels like they weren't helped by another woman. Because there is this high expectation and there is this role, and there are fewer women in tech, right? So it feels even more important that a woman would help another woman. And I talk a little bit about well, why, if and I certainly talked with women where they'd had negative experiences with this, where they'd thought a woman would help them and didn't. And they were really thinking about that and thinking about why that had happened, and had sometimes really carried with them feelings about whether they would even trust others the same way again after that experience. And so these were really legitimate experiences, but I was also kind of untangling why they would happen and what's happening here. And I think generally, listen, there's scarcity still. You might feel like you're the only woman on the board, or you're going to be the only woman VP. Mm-hmm. And when there's scarcity, humans tend to defend their position, right? Like while we'd all like us to be nice to each other, in general, if there's perceived scarcity, we're more likely to battle and defend than we are to, risk things. And so I do think that while some of this could be natural, and also there's the aspect of that if there's fewer women overall, then maybe all of us are in aggregate just very busy. And so sometimes we may not help as much as we even want to, because we're signing up to help a lot of people. And we kind of need everybody, not just women, to help, to make sure that we all rise. But I also think just that, there's just so many factors that I talk about in the book. Like, what are our expectations, and what happens when women don't do this, and do we give them feedback, or do we just kind of assume that they're bad, right? Like, there's just a lot going on. So I would generally say, to wrap this up in a little bit briefer, there's definitely cases where this happens, and I talk about them in the book. I think that often what can happen is that because there's fewer women, we can really kind of a one bad apple spoils the bunch kind of thing. Mm-hmm. We start to feel negatively about women overall. And I didn't necessarily see that this was widespread. I think this happens, but I think there's a lot of women out there helping each other. Mm-hmm. And we really should, even if we do it minimally, because that's really the only way we get out of this game. Right? Yes. There's a scarcity game going on. And if we just keep perpetuating it, we never really change the story. And so, even if it's just lightweight thing where you take on a mentor or two, or not even mentorships, you just do coffee chats now and then, I think that can really help.
Yes, I agree. Yes. Well, that's what all the questions that I prepared for you. Thank you very much, Alana. You would like to say something else to close?
Oh, well, just I would just say, if you have more questions for me, you're watching this and you're curious about anything else, you can always reach out to me at alanakaren.com, or I'm on social media, like on LinkedIn, and reach out, and I'm happy to chat with you. You'll also find information about my book there, or most places where books are sold.
I will share the links, because they can find it also in Amazon and here in the Netherlands in bol.com. So
yes.
So I will share the link, and then have it easier to get your book.
Awesome. Well, great questions. Thank you so much. It was great. I'm so glad to see that the book is being talked about, and not just in Silicon Valley, but everywhere, because I think it really can hopefully help people feel like they belong in tech. And that's what I'm driving for.
Yeah, I think when you read the book, you feel like, okay, we can do things. It's like motivates you. So it's really good. Thank you, Alana. Thank you very much,
Yay.
and
Thank
thank you for sharing with us. Okay, bye.
Bye.